Hi everyone, today I want to talk to you about my top 3 paranormal romance reads. It was very difficult to pick 3 out of all the paranormal romance that I've read, but I came up with a system. So I have read a fair variety and I have definitely acquired some favourite authors. So I love Rochelle Mead, I love Nalini Singh, I love J.R. Ward, I love all of the big ones, particularly the ones who do vampires, because vampire paranormal romance is my top pick. But when I look back over all of the books that I had read, I found that the titles blurred and suddenly I couldn't distinguish them quite as easily. So I can remember what happened in a particular series and I can remember who the characters were, but there were no particular books that jumped out at me. So I decided that I would pick my favourites based on the individual books that I could remember from series, on the basis that that was then the sort of standout of the series. That was my favourite one. And it happened that I think that they each actually fell within my favourite authors' remits. So without further ado, let's go on to the first one. My first pick is Vamps and the City, which is the second book in Carolyn Sparks's Love at Stake series. Now, why this one? Well, Vamps in the City has a sort of True Blood-esque feel to it. It is a series where a clever guy finds a blood substitute and vampires can therefore have synthetic blood and aren't presenting much of a risk to humans. But vamps are still living in secret and they have their own television channel. And Darcy, who's the main female protagonist in this book, works for the TV channel and she's trying to come up with an exciting new programme for them. And she comes up with a reality show, which is basically The Bachelor, only for vampires. And Austin, who is a guy who has found out about the Vampire Channel, is human. And he decides he's going to infiltrate this programme along with the help of one of his friends. So he ends up on this vampire dating programme trying to win the heart of the vampire bachelorette whilst actually being human. I'll just never forget the setup. It's so hilarious and the writing itself is so funny. I mean, I do just love this series anyway. I think it's wonderfully put together and just great fun because the jokes do not stop coming. But the way that Carolyn manages to stack the different levels of jeopardy into something that is this bizarre and this completely entrancing just really blew me away. It's something that I reread all the time. I mean, I like this series a lot, but this is the one book that I always look forward to in it. So that's why it's on this list. I would put that at number 3 in my all-time top vampire paranormal romance reads. Next up, and obviously I couldn't do a vampire paranormal romance segment without talking about this author, is Charlaine Harris's Dead to the World. Like the Carolyn Sparks books, this is one where I reread the series and this is the book that I look forward to. It's the 4th in the Sookie Stackhouse series and it follows the same characters that we're used to. So Sookie, who works in a bar in Bontemps, and Eric Northman, who is the head of the local vampire group and runs a bar in Shreveport close by. And there are a bunch of witches who turn up and take Eric's memory away, and here's someone with whom Sookie has had a bit of a flirtation, and she finds him one night on her way home from work running naked down the road with no memory of who she is or who he is or what has happened, and he latches onto Sookie and becomes someone not very much like himself, but still, because it's him, you sort of have that wonderful crunchy romance. I have to say, amnesia is one of my favourite romance tropes. I love it. I know it's tacky and overdone, but I love it so much, and it was done so well by Charlaine in this series. I just adore this book so much. I was so happy when I was watching the True Blood series and they took this storyline into the television series as well, so you get to see this, although obviously it's not as involved because, you know, you get to see more of it in the book. And what I think I love most about this is that the whole thing sets up the relationship between Suki and Eric for the rest of the series. So you have this tension of this past that is waiting behind them and waiting at sort of the depth of their relationship. And you're waiting to see how it'll play out as this person who really wasn't Eric but was him. It's sort of the fundamental Eric rather than the polished Eric. Struggles with who he became without all of the artifice that he's created around his character. And I thought it was incredibly well done. So that's why this is number 2 on my list of all-time favourite vampire paranormal romance reads. So my final top spot goes to dun, 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 Gail Carriger's Soulless. If you haven't read these books, you really, really should. They are so good. So this is actually the first book in a series. This is the first in her Parasol Protectorate series. She has a whole world that she's built up around these characters now. There's a prequel series that is a YA series, and there's another YA series that's a sequel series, and she's also got little sexy novellas sprinkled throughout her timeline. But basically, it is Victorian, so sort of steampunkish, though I think she tends to say that it's not steampunk. There are steampunk elements, but it's not hardcore steampunk. So it's set in the Victorian age, and there are vampires and werewolves, and they've always been part of society, and they are entrenched to such degree that there is a sort of triumvirate of advisors to Queen Victoria who consist of a vampire, a werewolf, and another type of person that is the kind of person that Alexia is, who is the protagonist of these books, which is a soulless person. And the interaction between those 3 types of paranormal creatures is just wonderful. I love the way she structured the world. I love the world building of the magic, basically, the magic system, I thought was great. Because the idea is that people can apply to a vampire hive or a werewolf pack in order to be turned into one of them, and they become a sort of indentured servant to them until they have basically earned enough points in order to be turned. But they only go for people who are creative, people who are dancers, sculptors, actors, painters, you know, whatever, on the basis that the only people who can successfully be turned into a vampire or a werewolf are people who are born with an excess of soul. And Alexia, the main character, is completely the opposite. She has no soul at all. And so she has particular powers that interact with the powers of the vampires and werewolves that I'm not going to talk about, because I don't want to spoil it for you. Her books are incredible. She's got other bits and pieces out at the moment. I think she's got an romance, that the Shifters. I haven't read those yet, but I've read absolutely everything in her world of the Parasol Protectorate, and I just think they're brilliant. They're the most novel and fun and funny books that I've ever read, really, in paranormal romance. So that's why that is my number 1 vampire paranormal romance read of all time. And if you have any particular favourite paranormal romance reads, then get in touch and let me know. You can put your comments below, or you can tweet me at Josie Jaffrey. In the new year, I'll be bringing out some new top 3s in my favourite genres, including fantasy, YA fantasy and sci-fi, amongst many more. So if you want to see more, then do subscribe to the channel. The subscribe link's coming up in a second. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.